element is that the more we practice those things, the more we understand that when there are real, very good quality video conferencing capacities, it changes the nature. It's the moment where you don't think about the technology anymore. It is there, and you work. And so the idea was just to explore first what are the current practices, like for people like us who either organize or participate in working group. What are the key problems, and what are the possible ways forward? And one of the things is that today international cooperation in physical rooms is mostly done in international organizations who have the buildings and the spaces. And one of the ideas is, why wouldn't it be possible to think about networking those physical facilities that the international organizations have around the world, have a very good equipment for video conferencing, and allowing working groups that are working on internet governance sorry, to leverage some of those spaces. That's one of the ideas to explore. But first, maybe let's start with just the practical experience. James, you're at ISOC in charge of communications in general. Can you tell us more about the practice and how you do the online work? And also you organized the intercommunity, which was a big event that gathered people really around the world in a collaborative manner. How's the practice and the problems?
So as Bertrand says, I look after communications at the Internet Society, and we have really begun something of an exercise and project this year in using video conferencing tools more effectively. And I think it's fair to say that this has been hugely successful for us, and it has redefined the way in which we work as an organization around the world. To give you an idea, we started out in January, February with about 150 or so meetings over the course of a month, and that's now climbed and increased to nearly 500. So
sorry, when you say 150 meetings, Anne and Bob, please come over there. Anne, if you want to come here, you're highly welcome. Really, it's a perfect addition. Yeah, you say you started with 150 video conferencing and moved to 500.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but at this point, the vast majority of our work is happening via collaborative tools, video conferencing, and one in particular, you've mentioned Zoom, and that has really been responsible for driving the way in which we're working at this point. But from my perspective, I am a user of the tool, and I can tell you that I find it very difficult now to have a phone conversation. Zoom and video conferencing and working in that virtual environment has become second nature to me, and that happened very fast.
So that's maybe the moment to make a distinction between two types of tools or practices. One is the video conferencing in general, which is just the equivalent of a physical meeting where people are exchanging. The other side, which is slightly different, is, and can be done at the same time, but anything that is related to the production of something, like the drafting, the drafting of documents. But as far as video conferencing is concerned, Michael, can you?
Well, I can talk to a lot of different aspects of this. You can
maybe introduce yourself and say where you're coming
right.
from.
I'm Michael Nelson. I work for Cloudflare, which is a web security company in San Francisco. I'm based in Washington, so I spend a lot of time online with my colleagues. But my experience comes partly from academia, where I was working at Georgetown, and also from the Internet Society DC chapter, which has been very innovative in doing webcasts and trying to make them more than just a broadcast medium. So we have brought people into the room as presenters, and we've done a lot of Q&A. We don't do lectures, we do discussions. We don't have panelists, we have discussion starters. People typically talk for 3 or 4 minutes and then engage with the audience, and the audience is in the room and remote, just like this conference. I mean, I think this is actually the most important session of the whole IGF.
Absolutely.
Because it could really spark a lot of good ideas and change the way we do things going forward. And I do hope, I'm almost certain there are more people watching than are around the table. But the distinction has to be made, as you just did, between are you broadcasting content or are you trying to get people to work together to create something, whether it's a document, a program, a PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah, good idea.
The IETF, of course, is the oldest and
Yeah.
in many ways the most successful virtual organization, and they rely on 20-year-old tools called listservs and email. And because the community is familiar with that and they've all grown up with it, that's worked very well. But for many people who don't know each other, where you don't have an established community and where you don't get together every 4 months to make those contacts, face-to-face is incredibly important. When I was at CSC as a consultant, every Friday, our small team of about 7 people just got on a Google Hangout and just hung out. It was the hour where we just shared how our week went. And that spontaneous kind of sharing is really important. And when we design virtual conferences, and the intercommunity was an example of that, we usually don't think about having a equivalent of the hallway conversation. But if we really want to do this right, we have the big broadcast mode, like we've been having in the main meeting hall. We have the smaller sessions like this, where people are talking back and forth. And then we have a push here to step in the hallway button.
Yeah.
And we can now
the
do
water
that.
cooler,
Yeah.
the water cooler equivalent of the.
But that's why just having us meet at the most sophisticated facilities and all sharing the same experience is about 30% of what we could do. I think in the end, this is going to have to be something where we want it on the desktop and on the laptop. And the challenge is going to be getting enough connectivity and training for the people we really want to bring to the meeting who can't afford to come here. And those are the people in the developing countries or the NGOs who don't have the travel budget, but might also not have 10 megs.
Yeah.
I know that when ISOC first started doing these video conferences for the board about 5 years ago, they had a member who was on a South Pacific island.
Yeah.
He consumed the entire country's bandwidth when he got on these board calls. And luckily it was at 2 o'clock in the morning, but it still was a problem.
So I think that you raised some really interesting points, and I want to cover some of what you said and you too. So I think a lot of the meetings that we've had and the reason for the growth and the increase in our use of Zoom has been exactly that spontaneous kind of water cooler meeting, and we do use it. I know in my team, people will just hop on Zoom without thinking about it. My team is extremely distributed. You know, we are a global organization in a physical sense as well. And people use Zoom to chat with each other as and when it suits them. We don't need to schedule. And it's important sometimes to have meetings that don't necessarily have an agenda. In terms of, I think there are some important considerations to bear in mind when thinking about any of these kinds of tools. This really is an initiative of our IT business, and they've approached this extremely rationally, understanding that the tool needs to be extremely easy for everybody to use. Adoption will only happen because people aren't intimidated by the technology. And in addition to that, you've touched on the need to differentiate between video conferencing and broadcasting and collaborative working. Something like Zoom will allow you to collaborate around a document. You can share your screen, you can record the meeting, you can make edits, you can actually work within the platform to achieve your objectives. And on the technology front, we find that overall bandwidth required per individual is no more than about 3 megabits per second now. And if you turn video off, that will go down to 1.
Just one other feature that we should think about, and I think we could generate a lot of attention by using online polling during talks to bring people into the experience, to make sure they're paying attention, but also to generate real interesting insights in a big meeting. If you're doing the broadcast, it's nice to have a place where the speaker can say, okay, I've explained to you my position on X. Do you agree or disagree? The most effective use of this was the old agenda meetings where they used clickers. Everybody had wireless clickers.
Yeah.
And they would do a survey of like 5 questions with the top people in the industry and find out, you know, who thought Microsoft was going to beat Apple. This was in the 90s.
That was in the 90s.
But the best part is during the talks, during the talks,
Yeah, yeah.
you could vote more minutes for the speaker
Oh, yeah.
or cut him off. So if he got lots of low rankings, the clock would actually speed up.
I'd like to ask Bob Pepper. You're with Cisco. Cisco has a range of product from very different capacities, including the very top range that used to be called, I don't know if it's still the case, telepresence. The question of the bandwidth capacity and the capacity of the technology to make it not something that has to be fine-tuned every time, but that becomes so self-evident that you don't even think about it. How do you perceive that?
You know,
without making a competition between the different tools?
It's very similar. So we, used to have separate tools that now have been integrated. So we used to have,
That's important.
telepresence, very high-end video conferencing. Essentially, it's like sitting in a conference room anywhere in the world, life-size, face-to-face. You can see if somebody, blinks, or if there was an eyelash, right? You could see it.
I understand that one of the defining differences was the size, the fact that you saw people more.
Well, that's right. And also
life-size.
we still have that. It's the high-end telepresence rooms in which all of the rooms are the same, the furniture is the same, you have multiple screens, and you can actually, and it's voice activated. So if somebody we can have 50, 60 different locations in which, you're in that conference room, and it would be as though, the two of you are sitting in Paris, 2 more in Washington, 2 more in Paso, and then if somebody from Rio speaks, they pop up on the screen in the conference room. But since everything looks the same, you have the feeling of it being in the same room. And then we also had WebEx, which was a audio conferencing collaborative tool, sharing documents, and then the Jabber tool. And all of these now have become integrated. So we still have the high-end telepresence, which is the same experience, but now what we've done is integrated video into Jabber and WebEx, and I can use my laptop, my Galaxy or iPad, and enter a telepresence room through a bridge. And so for me, right, it will be, I'll be looking at my screen, but using the camera, which is high definition now, on my Mac, I will appear full size in a telepresence room. All of these are integrated. Now going back to your question, which is the bandwidth, it's rate adaptive. It didn't used to be. So the notion of rate adaptive, and there are times also similar where, like with Zoom, I turn off the video because if I'm frankly in a hotel in El Paso, my bandwidth isn't great. So what I basically do is I don't enable the video, and it's just voice, but then collaboration, sharing of the documents, editing together, and so on, and that takes video, it's rate adaptive. So if I'm in WebEx and have video in WebEx, it will appear automatically in telepresence. And what it does, it changes the behavior. The point is, it changes behavior because people, as I think Mike, as you said, we don't think about it. That's what we do. We don't use telephones.
I have difficulty with this.
Yeah, and what you do is, in Jabber, if you see somebody in instant messaging, you click and you say, let's get on, and you can initiate from within Jabber a WebEx video collaboration session.
Without going on a different track, it's just a side notion. It's interesting to see that we had the computer, the evolution that led to the laptops, and now we're doing a lot of things on a very, very small thing. Do you think that there's another trend that will evolve? When you look at the price of a flat screen about that size, do you think that our desks are going to contain that sort of thing to have a much stronger
Mike says no.
size?
Mike says no. I actually think the answer is
it's just a question.
Yeah, I think the answer. So when I'm at my desk at home, I have a we bought, a number of years ago, bought Tandberg, and they developed, the really great technology. And so it's a flat panel that I use, it's essentially just plug in my laptop, and so I have the big screen when I'm doing the documents. That screen also has a really very high resolution camera built into it, and I use that if I'm doing telepresence. So I can go from the WebEx to the video to the telepresence. It will appear for me because I'm close to it, life size, and then I will appear in a telepresence. So I think it's all of the above. It's not either or. The answer is yes.
Exactly. That's why I was nodding my head. Is that Bob's not revealing the fact that he's only home for about 2 days a month. So, and we have to subdivide the mobile workers, the people who are going to use their phone because 80% of the time that's all they got, and then there are the people who, maybe a stockbroker who sits there in front of a screen all day and will want to do exactly what you were talking about and push a button and talk to Malaysia.
We have 8 minutes left because I know you have the OECD forum in the very same room afterwards. But Anne Carblanc is at the OECD. Can you share the experience at the OECD, both in the use of those tools, but also on the more collaborative part of editing and producing documents and the methodology? Because that's another aspect. On the conferencing tools, I think there's been tremendous progress made. But on the collaboration tool themselves, I'm not sure that we have evolved yet so much.
We have experience in the OECD with these tools, but what I'm going to say is from a user point of view, shouldn't be, I speak just with my lawyer next to me. So first of all, before I tell you what we have in terms of collaborative tools and whatever video conferencing system, I would like to say that in terms of screens, what is ideal, in fact, is to have 2 or 3 screens. Yeah. For instance, when we work on developing a legal instrument or a report, you can have different sets of comments, or you can have your email and then 2 documents. It's extremely easy to drag and drop from one to the other. That's essential. The one screen, increasingly we have 2 screens on our desks, just to make it easier. We're going back to, I would say, the physical environment where you could have papers on the table. Okay, our experience with conferencing, we use both WebEx and GoToMeeting. It's better than nothing. It's better than, but it doesn't work well. For many reasons, some people join by phone. The sound can be, the voice can be terribly bad. You have a lot of noise. There's only one screen, that is the master screen, that can, share something. It would be wonderful if this would be improved, because in an intergovernmental organization like the OECD, we move twice a year. I don't know how many, 200, we have 200 committees and bodies, multiplied by 34 plus the partners. All these people are taking a plane to come to these meetings twice a year. We've never calculated the print on the environment, but that would be tremendously useful. That would make the work also more linear, intersessions. And just...
You bring out the most important point, which is that you're subject to the worst connection among the 50 or 100 people that are on there. You're always at the mercy
Yeah.
some poor person
The
who's
weakest
on a
link,
really
in fact,
bad.
is bothering
Yeah.
everybody else. So I don't know how to solve that, but the day we make progress there, it will be absolutely wonderful. And the last thing, for sharing documents, we use eShare. So it allows several people to work on a document, but it's quite heavy, in fact. It's quite heavy.
One
It's
question.
not, we're not yet there, but it's better
one
than
question
what
I
we are.
wanted to ask, and I give it to international organizations. Actually, are a very interesting test case because you have both internal staff. I don't know if OECD has a lot of offices that are distributed, probably less than some other structures. But the committees and the groups that have to produce something, they are confronted with this problem that if you want to have the expert working group meeting, it's the cost of bringing people, it's the time to find the slot in the agenda and so on. And so at the moment, the possibility of telling people, okay, you go to a hub there and have the equivalent of a telepresence or very high quality standardized system, regional, does not exist. Is it something that would be interesting? And if I throw an idea, like just as a hypothesis, when you look at the facilities that all international organizations have, you have some in Paris, but there are other organizations that are based in other places. Would there be something that could be explored that would bring basically a very good installation in at least 1 or 2 rooms in each of those different organizations and allow them to network so that if, for instance, in our topics on internet governance, you have a group of 10 people, one could be in UNESCO, the other one in OECD and so on, and work together. Is that a dream?
I don't know whether it's a dream, but that would be wonderful if we could have, at least to start with, regional places where people would travel,
Hubs.
possibly, but it
Okay.
would be less long.
So
And we have 3 minutes.
3 minutes, so we'll make
let's wrap
it
up.
quick. So the idea of hubs or nodes, I think, is an excellent one, and to some extent, I feel as though we've proved that concept with our intercommunity event that Michael referenced beforehand. We set up 15 nodes around the world, across Africa, Latin America, Asia, Europe, and we had 1,000 plus people participating in those nodes, all for the cost of one license in Zoom, which is $19.99. So we could have had another 1,000. We've not actually really touched on cost, nor have we touched on the capacity of the system. And I think these two are very clearly important factors. But for us, something like this tool works really, really well. It's got so much flexibility and adaptability built in. You can take it mobile. You can probably equip a fixed conference room for around about $3,000 with high definition, enough for 20, 25 people. And you could take that around the world. It's sufficiently adaptable to move it around. So if you wanted to change the node location, you could do that easily.
One, brief sentences.
It was just to say that I'm happy to be in contact with whomever is willing to help us. We can experiment. We have an IT department. And in any case, if we can improve and lessen the cost of those ritual 2 meetings a year, that would be great.
We're talking to Zoom, and we're collaborating with them in real terms to help them improve and build in even more features. It's already feature rich, and this is an important factor. But they're doing more work. That's great.
Michael.
I wanted to finish with one thought, which is I boycotted the first 7 IGFs because I thought that the whole process should be done online. And instead of going to the meetings, I stayed up at 2 o'clock in the morning to watch the Hydro at that session. So at least one person was part of the virtual community. But we have a huge barrier, and it's not cost, it's not bandwidth, it's DIGHATIC. DIGHATIC. This is what forces us to come. Diplomatic, internet governance, hotel, airline, taxi, industry complex.
That's quite an acronym.
That's why we won't be able to ever get rid of having personal meetings.
Okay, so anyway, I have 55 seconds, which is absolutely perfect to say that, one, I wanted to test whether the birds of a feather concept was a good idea. As far as I'm concerned, it worked exactly the way I hoped. I think it has identified a certain number of sub-elements and confirmed that this is actually an issue and that there's some evolution that exists. If you are okay, I'd be happy to try to continue this discussion, maybe online in an informal day.
Ask how many of those people are here for this session.
No, I think the people who are here came for the OECD forum, which is actually starting in 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.